Thank you. Thank you very much for this possibility to talk to you now. And I'm going to proceed with this problem. Really, this is a great opportunity to approach the problem of war. When we think of victory, we have something different. And I will talk to you according to this plan, so that you know in advance what I'm going to tell you. I will start with just considerations of what victory in general is about, and then I will stick to thinking what is truly a goal and what is truly a war. And then I will analyze different normative conceptions of war, and then we'll try to think to what extent is it possible to win a contemporary war? And then we'll turn to just war, which is the title of my presentation. So what victory is about, we've been thinking of it already. I believe victory, unlike success, is a normative concept. And as a normative concept, we have to deal with two sides of this, of victory. Namely, we can treat it as a goal in our war and as means, or war itself. So, as we take it as a normative problem, we have to understand it as a happy marriage of what is truly a goal to what is truly a war. But the problem, of course, is very large, and it also embraces semantics to the great extent. In Western languages, almost everywhere, we have victory. In Slavic language, it is a little bit different. Our word for war means a little bit different thing. It is not about glamour, and it is not about legal procedures. It is about overcoming trouble, which is deeply there. We have to overcome trouble. So there is a little bit different meaning here. And of course, the Western meaning of victory inherited lots of Roman attitude, including legality and glamour, which goes with victory. The problem of victory is also refers to the problem of collective choice. I'm not going to expand here on it, but it is quite evident here. I will just refer to Marx. For Marx, it was absolutely evident that in any war, the working classes lose and the upper classes gain. And to make my life easier, I will just present this table for you. It is, of course, it is a very rude table, but I will try to contemplate on this table. When we think of what is truly a goal, we may think of it in different terms, but we take into consideration values. It may be about values, it may be about interests, and both values and interests may be universal and particular. And so we have four possibilities here in general, I think. We can have sacred victory, and I can refer to Zombart here, his conception of victory. We can have roughly holy victory, and I will refer to Augustine here. We may have a limited victory, and that is about enlightened realism of Clausewitz, Morgenthau. To some extent it is militarism as well, and just victory, for the lack of better term, I will call it, is coincidence of interests and universalization of interests, or an attempt to universalize your interests. I believe that when we think what is really a goal in war, we better stick to the limited victory. Of course, it is normativity which is involved here, but I believe that that is the only really truly a goal in victory. all the rest is self-contradictory. And when I refer to that, I have in mind Clausewitz, Kant, Thucydides, Morgenthau, and Ilyin, Russian philosopher. And to the great extent, we can also speak about contingent pacifism here, and even militarists, if militarists stick to some limited goals in their attempts. There can hardly be victory in a full-blown war, if it is war for righteousness. At least the normativity I'm talking about, it's my understanding of normativity in terms of goals in war. Now I turn to the problem of what is truly a war. War we understand as means in this case. And of course we deal with very many different problems here. What is truly a war? Eskimo knows lots about the snow, and there are so many different words for the snow. For Eskimo, we use one and the same word, war, which is in fact, there can be very many different things which we unite by one and the same word. And now it is quite evident when we have all kinds of different wars, like wars in business or cyber wars. Is it really war? Here is what I understand may be referred as truly a war. A war is supposed to be more or less fair, or it is supposed to be a competition of near equals. It must imply some risk of life, at least. If it doesn't imply risk of life, like the war of drones, we could hardly consider it truly a war. We are supposed to have at least some respect for an enemy. If we don't have this respect, it can hardly be truly a war. And of course, this war must be proportional and discriminative, at least to some extent, at least to a certain minimum. But here we are getting a problem. The problem we already referred to if we take into consideration Clausewitz with his idea of escalation of war. We have at least 3 levels of enmity in every war. This is conventional enmity. At this level, it is possible to stick to these requirements. But usually, this conventional enmity soars to the level of real enmity, and we usually refer to this level as the war of a partisan. Carl Schmitt, in his book, well-known book, Theorie der Partisanen, gives us many examples how partisan wages his war. He is not expecting any mercy, and he is not providing any mercy. But still, this war is to the great extent limited, because he is not going to bring justice everywhere to all the people. That happens in absolute enmity, when we do not really regard our enemy as a human being. This is the case of demonization of our enemy, and for Clausewitz, that is really dangerous situation, as Clausewitz is trying at all costs to avoid achieving this state of enmity. When we lose our enemy, in fact, it is not human being any longer, and at the same time we lose politics. That is something different to politics. War is out of politics since this moment. What is truly a war, I believe, can exist only on the level of conventional enmity. On the level of real enmity, it starts to merge with other forms of massive violence. And I would prefer, if I am asked to give the definition of war, I would prefer to give the definition of war as a violence, as a form of violence. And war starts to merge, and at the level of absolute enmity, it's just one thing, it's just massive violence. There is no difference of genocide, ethnic cleansing, police operation, mass rape, etc. So at this level, absolute enmity war doesn't exist. It is not really a war any longer. It is something different. This is the totality of violence. The rules of our language, at least, I believe, reserve victory for war only, not for anything else. It is not about genocide. It is not about police operation. It is not about torture. It can be no victorious genocide. It can be no victorious terror or victorious torture. It is something different. At least we should stick to the rules of our language, even if in reality it is not this way. Now I will try to think or to refer to different normative, traditional normative ways of thinking about war, which is militarism, pacifism, just war theory, etc. To what extent it is possible to win in terms of these different normative conceptions of war? I believe it is quite possible to win for militarists, because militarists can respect all these requirements I figured out before. So he can stick to this idea of the limited war to the great extent, and so we can say that he can pass our even pacifism. Even pacifism, we usually do not speak of pacifism in terms of war, but pacifist also wages a kind of war, which is a war on war in general, and a war against militant human nature, so to say. And if we take Tolstoy, for example, there is a great deal of understanding that Tolstoy was waging war, in a way, although it was a special war against war in general. And if we take Russian history of the 1920s, we had a real war against Tolstoy communes, which were spread all over Russia, and they were submitted and annihilated with furor, which I still do not understand, this hatred of Bolsheviks to Tolstoy's communes. And of course, when it comes to contingent pacifism, there is no question. Contingent pacifist can be victorious because he sticks to limited war and he honors the limitations I was talking about. If we take realism, of course there are different kinds of realism. The so-called vulgar realism can hardly be victorious in the long run, because sooner or later he's coming to solitary, nasty, brutish and short version of our communication on this planet. But we can refer to realism of Thucydides, Clausewitz, Morgenthau, which is really enlightened realism, and it is possible to stick to normative conceptions of war if we follow this line. When it comes to just war theory, I believe we have a problem here, as the so-called just war theory, at least as I understand it, is to great extent self-contradictory. We have two theories here, to say the least: a holy war theory and a limited war theory. They just coexist, but they go in different directions, and sometimes they merge, but sometimes they can part company. So this is not a stable doctrine. We have to clearly understand what really we keep in mind. Is it a holy war doctrine, or is it a limited war doctrine? Now just to think about, this is a picture by Jasper Francis Crosby, The Spirit of the War. I believe that is really what war is about. That is about the goals, truly a goal, and truly means limited war in a way. Knighthood is involved here. That what real war should be about. Could you really draw a picture, a spirit of genocide, or a spirit of torture, or a spirit of mass rape? It would be something different. So a real war is something about that. And of course, when we think of victory, we must take into consideration what is truly a war. But what is happening to war now? We've been talking of it already, so I will not contemplate here a lot about that. Asymmetric warfare, private military companies, the use of drones, targeted killings, that is anathema from the point of view of Clausewitz. This is anathema to war. And I believe that is not truly war what we are having now. The problem with the contemporary developments in terms of war, of course, is not that we are not supposed to use all these innovations, but maybe we should cease using the term war in terms of all these developments. Just to remind you my list of what is truly a war. War ceased to exist at this level. So the problem of the contemporary war is that it is absolute war even without hatred. For Clausewitz, we had to climb to get to this condition of absolute war. But the very technical facilities of contemporary war give us absolute war immediately. We are in absolute war without even hating our enemy. And the problem with the contemporary war is that exactly that it is driving us to absolute enmity, even if we do not really want to hate. And it is in the nature of the contemporary war itself. And the war, as it becomes absolute enmity from the very beginning, ceases to be really a war. And victory in this war is not possible any longer. But we can try, of course, because there is at least some hope remaining as our warriors still stick to some ethics, to some warriors' ethics, which still exist, in fact, which still exist. Even in terms of this kind of war, it is possible, but not when this kind of war meets what we sometimes call just war, or I would use better the term holy war. When holy war means the contemporary war, we have no chances any longer. And there is no possibility even to speak of victory in such a situation. It doesn't matter if it is Augustine with his idea of holy war for true religion, or if it is a war for the sake of democracy or human rights. It doesn't really matter. Anyway, it is war for some abstract values. Anyway, it is war for righteousness, and no victory is really possible at this level. So this ideological warfare, how much time do I have?
Well, you have 5-10 minutes.
So it started long ago. It belongs to modernity. I can refer to the French, which started this kind of war. And of course, these guys here were starting this kind of liberal crusading. I miss Bin Laden here. But this is idea of crusading, which we have here. And it drives us to catastrophe, to a catastrophe. I would refer here to Dostoevsky, who knew all about this, everything about this possibility of crusade. I love humanity, but the more I love humanity in general, and it is about abstract values here, of course, the more I love humanity in general, the less I love men in particular. I become an enemy of people the moment they come close to me. But the more I hated that man individually, the more ardent became my love for humanity in general. I believe that is to the great extent about the idea of just war, or holy war. I prefer this term, the idea of holy war. And if you take Dostoevsky, The Possessed, that is exactly about these kind of things. So my ideal belongs to the past more than to the future or to the present. I believe we can find a way to return, at least in some way, to recommendations of Kant, that the state should withdraw from any particular moralistic qualifications of each other. And just war theory is exactly about that. It is about moralistic qualifications of each other, which drives us to absolute enmity and demonization of our enemy. It's all the time it is the same Westphalian order, at least to some extent, and United Nations Charter, which was forgotten together with international law because of the condition of sole superpower. I think we can restore this ideal, and it will inevitably be restored because the condition of sole superpower is changing now, hopefully. I will skip some of the slides here. And what I take as paradigmatic cases of the contemporary just war are humanitarian intervention and war on terror. Both, for my mind at least, are extremely dangerous, and both never can end victoriously. I do not know any case of humanitarian intervention which lasted victoriously or even successfully. I don't know any case of successful humanitarian intervention. I could refer to John Stuart Mill here, but maybe it's not that. I would better refer to Schmidt here. Humanity as such cannot wage war because it has no enemy, at least not on this planet. Whenever we start waging war for humanity, we just inevitably demonize our enemy. And the war on terror. There were lots of criticism on the war of terror, so I'm not going to repeat all this criticism. I agree with all this criticism referring to the war on terror. You may wage war on walking with the same success. It's a kind of a strange war for me. And whenever you apply to this war, inevitably you violate the necessary procedures of use in battle. You employ targeted killings, extrajudicial detentions, torture. And recently, many people came to justification of torture, which to my mind is absolutely forbidden. I do not think torture may be justified. And of course, war in this case, as well as victory, is unattainable. War is formulated in this case as a potentially endless struggle against infinitely extended enemy that permits all borders and that may inhabit any sphere. There can be no victory in this case. The problem with just war theory, or the problem with bringing justice in war, is that the more just our war, the less just it is in terms of means, and vice versa. So a holy war is always driving us to unlimited war. And to the great extent, the problem with just war theory is that it is becoming an ideology rather than a theory. And that is a rather dangerous ideology, which can be used as a war cry for certain people and as a harness at the same time for other people, and taken into consideration our possibilities in information warfare. It becomes a major instrument in information warfare. This is my conclusion. It is only possible to win a limited war for particular interests. All other forms of war are the wars of absolute enmity which cannot be won. The contemporary war is almost inevitably a war of absolute enmity. If it is, in addition, a just war, or better say holy war, it drives us to absolute enmity almost inevitably, which makes victory an exercise in futility. Thank you.